Okay, so one of the things I think that terrifies some students and um, I think developers learn to love over time is the command line. And the reason for that is because initially it doesn't give you really great feedback in most cases. It'll either, when you type something, in many cases give you no response back and just a new command prompt. Or in other cases, it might give you a strange error message. Or it might just hang and not appear to be doing anything at all. And so it's a little bit more mysterious until you kind of get comfortable with the fact that if it's not giving you feedback, it may not mean that things have failed. It may just mean that it's busy and it's working on something. And the person that designed whatever program you're running doesn't provide UI feedback, doesn't provide like a progress bar or message that says it was successful. Um, Developers are more aware of that. And so for maybe consumer applications, they're willing to put some more feedback at the command line to let you know that something's happening or something's going on. So I would just be wary of the low feedback as a reason to justify it being scary or not understanding. And also, it's very precise. And so, programming in general is a game of precision where spaces and punctuation and the way things are spelled are very important. So the command line, all the more important because it has very little amount of feedback other than the things you're typing and the keys that you're hitting. So I would get used to the command line. The faster you get used to it, the happier you'll be as a developer because you may very quickly realize that you can get a lot done at the command line with less keystrokes. And there's not as much clicking. I know folks, especially folks that are used to like a Windows environment, are used to being able to click everywhere and right click and use menus and have context awareness based on where you're clicking. Command line doesn't provide that, but what it does provide, hopefully, is the efficiency of keeping your hands on the keyboard rather than having to move a mouse around and take your hands off the keyboard. So if you can just kind of get used to keeping your hands on the keyboard as much as possible, it will make you more efficient over time. Initially, it's brutal. It's very painful. But eventually, you'll get better and better at just using keystrokes, shortcuts, key commands, and the command line to be efficient. So the real basics of the command line, um, again, for a Linux terminal or for a Macintosh, are going to be things that you should just memorize. And so everything that we're going to cover today, you should just memorize and just learn how to use as quickly as possible. I'll try and cover the popular things, and then you can explore some of the other things later on. I will also only use, well, I will only intentionally try and use commands that are going to work on Linux. I may accidentally default back to some like previous Windows life and type something that's a Windows command. But generally speaking, we want to use Linux as engineers because that's usually where we're running our code, as I mentioned earlier. So that's why most people will use a Macintosh computer to engineer if they're planning to deploy their code to a Linux server, because Macintoshes run Darwin, which is one of the many flavors of Linux, and it's fairly compatible with either CentOS or Ubuntu or Debian or any of the other flavors of Linux that you might write your code on the computer and then push out to some server an environment somewhere else. So all the commands that we're going to use are going to work on any of those environments. The ones that we're using are so foundational, just navigating around the file system and creating files, that they should pretty much work everywhere.